Hello and welcome to Project Management Pod. The pod is a place where we do projects, basically. It's a practical area completely designed for doing projects, not operations, not ongoing work, but project work, which we know is temporary and unique. And so the pod is divided into these three areas. It's a room about 20 by 20, or let's say 20 by 30, so about 400 square feet, 600 square feet, 30 square meters if you're in Europe. And it's into three particular areas. So the what area, which we can show you later, the why area, which gets into conflict, motivation, team development, stuff like that. And then there's the how area that I'm going to be showing you today. How are we going to get it done with this virus in particular in our case? And how are we going to get it done when there's budget constraints, when there's resourcing challenges, when there's multiple other projects? And so the how area uses concepts from things like the PMBOK, but in a more simplistic way. As you know, the PMBOK is quite a large book. This is it in its 6th edition. It's about 800, 900 pages, $100, $100. But it has 49 processes, and that's too much for us. We're also going to be looking into my own book, Keeping Score, which looks at 9 key steps, 9 concepts, if you want, but sequentially. So using golf as a metaphor, we line them up first hole to 9th hole, and we say that when you're on the 5th hole, you're doing risks, you're not on the 3rd hole, which is where we're going to be doing requirements, for example, in our case. So that's another thing that we'll be thinking of. So the pod is what we're focusing on here. The blue area is where the science area, if you want, it's where we can verify that we will have the resources, that we have the amount of work, that we understand the risks, that we know who the stakeholders are. And so you can see behind me, we have these exercises that we'll do. We can do them based on a case study, in our case, the Odyssey. You can see over my shoulder, we have Odysseus and Zeus and Poseidon and all those famous characters. That will help us to understand the journey, and all your projects are a journey, and some of them perhaps more of an epic as you look at them. Also, if we have time, we're going to get into some other things that I hope you'll enjoy, and one of them would be the actual board game itself. So the Odyssey is actually a full board game where we start with the goal, what Odysseus was trying to achieve, the stakeholders, including Penelope, his wife, and Telemachus, his son, and all the other ones, the suitors and Tiresias. And then the requirements of the stakeholders. The requirements, obviously, something very important to project management: desires, hopes, needs, expectations, wants. So the stakeholders have requirements, and the requirements generate work. And so you can see here, it's a lot of work. And so many times on a project, that's the first baseline. So we have 3 baselines, as you know: the schedule, the budget, and the work, the amount of work, or you might call the scope. This is the scope of the project. The scope comes from the stakeholders to satisfy, or at least account for, the stakeholders to achieve the goal. And so we go in this direction. And then, and only then, we can talk about the risks, the concerns that we have of doing this work. So we have the concerns of doing the work to meet the requirements of the stakeholders. And then, of course, you can see you follow on and you get to build a schedule and a budget down here. So again, this is something we can ship to you. We have cards that go with it. You can play the cards. But you can see here, the landscape in the middle is your company. The landscape for Odysseus was the Mediterranean, as it was 3,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, more. And so you get this idea that there's a landscape that you have for your, maybe you're in pharmaceutical, or maybe you're in finance, maybe you're in nonprofit organizations, but you have a landscape. You have regulations, you have rules, you have functions, you have different departments, if you want, in different areas. So that would be something that might help you. Another game that we do is for those of you that are thinking of the PMBOK, which is actually quite a complicated endeavor. This is the PMBOK on one page. And while you know that this is the PMBOK as you read it, and it actually is quite hard to read, this is the PMBOK as a map, or as a picture. And so we start with the project charter, and then you can see the stakeholders, identify the stakeholders. But you can understand that's in chapter 13, and this is in chapter 4. So there's actually quite a difference between them, even though they're side by side here. It's like saying that California and Connecticut are close alphabetically, but they're not close from a map. So we have all the way over there, we have execution over here, controlling. We have all of planning here, of course. And so the sequence of planning is also important. And that's captured by the inputs and the outputs. So the inputs and the outputs are also shown here. And finally, one more thing, we have the tools and techniques. So these come as cards, as you can see here. We set them out, you decide where to put them, and it's learning by doing. And so that's a very positive thing that we like to do. If we have time, and again, these are more games that you might like, we could do this one based on what's called program management. Now, program management is different from project management. Project temporary and unique. Program is more about the benefits from a group of projects together. This is based on the common idea of escape rooms that you see in a lot of houses and towns now that people do, where you escape out of a room. And it's quite exciting. My daughters tell me it's very good. This is an escape room. You have 4 rooms you have to escape from, and then finally you have to escape from the center. And then you know the equipment, you know the knowledge, in this case, sorry, of program management. You would do this. Okay, we start all projects with a concept, which is the portfolio. So how many other projects do you have in your area? And so we would imagine that you would see this, that there is a board where we represent all of the projects in your company. And you can see it here, but we represent them with chess pieces. Now we put the chess pieces out in what's called phases. So over here, we might have a concept phase or some kind of a feasibility, or we call a define phase. And then we have an analysis phase where we gather information, we do some designs, and we call this the design phase, and then we build it. So we're building something, or we're constructing something, we're implementing something, we're doing something basically here. Now we can't build it until we have designed it until we've defined it. And then finally over here, we have this phase called deploy, launch, go live, whatever you want to call it. Now Agile would seek us to see all these happening in one time frame, actually launching and defining in sprints, in these very short sprints. And so that's a very useful idea, but sometimes you will need to slow it down, and you'll say, listen, we should spend more time defining so that when we get to here, there won't be so much rework. And so once rework becomes a cost, well, then it's important to actually think about a different project life cycle. Also, if you want to get a fixed price contract, it's very hard to fix a price back here when you don't know what it is you're going to discover out here. And so that's why we use what's called the portfolio board. And again, that's something you'll be seeing in these classes. Anyway, again, my name is Frank Ryle. I hope you enjoy working with us. I look forward to getting to meet you. You'll be able to chat and send emails, and we'll be able to correspond with you. Okay, thank you.